All right, it's 6 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for our amazing guests. We have a wonderful panel, great guests, and a great discussion about social media and the news industry, journalism, and all that good stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and toss it over to our wonderful moderator, Adriana Lacy. She is an audience engagement editor at Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University.
Awesome. Thank you so much for passing it over to me. Super excited for the panel that we have today. We're going to be really just talking about how social media has changed the way that we report. During this panel, we'll pretty much just break down the evolving role of social media in the news business, talking about kind of, how it's become both a helpful reporting tool, but also kind of a, complex place and different challenges that occur with it. Before we kind of get into that conversation, though, I do want to introduce our amazing panelists. First off, we have Kim Stevens, who's an anchor at KMPH and an author of the book Broadcast News in the Digital Age, which offers a practical hands-on guide to the modern digital TV newsroom. And there it is right there. We also have Emily Stone, who's the VP of Digital Content Operations at Fox Television Stations. We have Javier Panzar, an audience engagement editor at the LA Times, and Samantha Nunez, the director of marketing and social media at LA Taco. So excited to have you all on this panel tonight. So to start the panel, I really kind of just want to start and talk about the good of social media. It's really been, such a pivotal tool for connecting with audiences. And I wanted to start with Samantha. You work at LA Taco, one of my favorite publications in LA. And one thing that I really love about LA Taco is that they really understand the importance of engaging with their audience. And I was just curious to know if kind of, what are some innovative ways that you and LA Taco have really used social media to build engagement around a story or a big project?
Right. First off, thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me. Here at LA Taco, with a name like LA Taco, it's needless to say, everyone wants to know what's going on. So we are a food, of course, culture and lifestyle publication, and we also do news as well. So when it comes to engaging our audience, everyone wants to know what's happening at the taco, not just because of the food, but more so the stories that we can tell about the food and the people that make the food. So we have people who are coming from it of communities that are families of entrepreneurs that are street vendors, or they know people who are street food vendors. So really publishing these stories and writing these stories and taking them to social media really allows people to resonate, not just with the food element, but more so with, maybe it's a father-daughter combo or it's a whole family ordeal. So being able to put these stories on social media and, showcase different parts of the story that may not get read all the way through is really a way that we enjoy storytelling. And what social media has given us is an opportunity to bring people in to different parts of the process, whether it's, they're interested in just the journalism, or they're interested in the food aspect, or they're interested in like the interpersonal relationships that can be showcased through video, through photo, and all that stuff.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of love that idea of bringing the audience kind of on the ride with you, because I think that's really important and really does help demystify the social media process. I don't know if any of our other panelists, Kim, Javier, Emily, if you kind of want to talk about how you've all used social media to build engagement around a story or anything.
I can hop in.
Yeah.
So I work with all of the Fox owned and operated stations who obviously have their own social presence, just like everyone here. Your publications work with social media to connect directly with the community. I mean, that's the best part about it. It's also the worst part about it, but that's for a later question. It's the best part about it because you have that direct line, right? Anyone has a voice on social media, which is wonderful. And you can hear feedback about stories, feedback about what people feel is important in the community. And that's really our main job, is to tell the stories that are important to the community, to hear from the community, and to give them a voice and tell them, important information that they need to know. So it's a great way to connect, to hear from them. It also exposes us to a completely different audience. I think we all know that a lot of people who there are a lot of us who don't watch TV every night, who maybe are not sitting down to watch the 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock news, whatever time it's on. And if you're like me, you can't stay up to watch the 11 o'clock news. So you have a different way to get your news. But I think it's the audience and the connection to the community that really benefits us and probably everyone here the most.
It's thanks for inviting us all here. This is fun. I mean, I think it's a lot of fun personally as a user person, just because you get to experience so many weird things directly from, even in a non-work context. Like, I follow a lot of weird film and Twitter people, and they just share funny, irreverent, like a screenshot of an interview a director did in the 1970s that you would have never seen before. Like that kind of stuff can be really fun. But for our reporter, I mean, I was a reporter for a while before I was in engagement. And I think it's a very useful tool for, just like you said, I mean, talking directly to people, finding people, reaching out with ideas and getting feedback. A lot of our reporters, I think it's different for every reporter and for every beat, but it can be a great tool for just figuring stuff out and gathering information. And it's one area where we live. I mean, some of us live on Twitter, some of us live on TikTok, some of us it's Instagram, but some of us it's TV, and then a lot of us, it's, walking down the street. So they're all different places where people live and exist, and there are different ways to use all of those. It used to just be you could walk around the street, talk to people for a story. Now it's a little more expanded.
And we also use it to kind of bring our viewers or our followers or our friends, whatever, behind the scenes. And so that they can see the process. We really try hard also, as I teach at Fresno State, to teach my journalism students to show the process journalism of what it takes from the beginning, maybe the pitching, to going out to do the story. There are some times that we get so many great things for a story, but we can't put it all in a minute 20 package on the news. So we add these other pieces in social to bring people along so they can feel like they're part of it, and that really does build engagement as well.
No, that's so great to hear. I love hearing kind of this common theme of just like, really bringing your viewers, your readers, your watchers along. And I think that's really, really important. And for those of you who are in the webinar right now, we're going to save some time at the end for questions. But if you do have questions or comments, feel free to utilize the chat option while we're talking, just so we can get to your questions at the end. So for the next question, I actually wanted to start with you, Emily. I'm sure there's a lot of moving parts at a place like Fox television stations when it comes to social and digital. How has social media really just changed the way that your staff kind of reports the news? Are there platforms that you go to first to find information?
There are so many platforms. I think that's the one thing. I mean, there are still the same number of us, and there are all these people, and they all use different platforms that are all different. I think I was thinking about this because I thought this would probably come up. For me, it's really two things. I think speed in so many ways. The pace, all of us know the pace of news is really just unmatched at this point. It's just so different. Even like the last 5 years, everything just happens like you're watching the newsroom. Like it's like, oh, it happened in 5 seconds when it really took 2 weeks. Now it feels like it happens in 5 seconds. And I think information spreads really quickly because of that. And there's really no more waiting. News happens right now. And so, a challenge of that is that if you're not reading the right thing, or you don't see something and it's being put out there, you've really got to be in tune, I think is a theme. Or you're already late. The volume too. I think everyone here will probably touch that. The volume is just tremendous of what there is to consume, or the things to be aware of. Just, taking it down to a local station, they have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Some of them use other platforms like TikTok. And it's like to stay in touch with all of that and really be on top of it and know when someone has said something important or when there's something out there in general that you should be aware of, is like an all the time kind of thing for everyone, for reporters and for everyone who's working on the main pages. I think an example of that, it happens all the time, but really, we used to get press releases or hear about a press conference that was going to happen, and we would know that there was going to be news. Now, if Tom Brady wants to unretire, he just puts it on Instagram and it happens. And it's like, the reaction to that is like, wait, is this real? Did Tom Brady get hacked? No, it's real. He's really back. And what does that mean? We'll decipher that later, but it's just that kind of crazy pace that we work with just all the time. So for us, it's that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that kind of puts a lot of pressure kind of on reporters and editors to really, be quicker. And I was just kind of curious from your perspective, Kim, like, do you feel like a bit of a, pressure to report faster or kind of change the way that you report because of kind of the ever super fast social media cycle?
Yeah, we still do have to take a breath for a moment, take a beat to make sure that, is this true? Like Emily had said the other day, it was April 1st, and we saw that all these tweets that Jen Psaki was leaving as the White House, and we thought, wait a minute, is this true? And it's also April 1st, so we've just really got to be careful about all of this. And so we still double check everything, and we keep saying, yes, we want to be first for sure, but being right and journalistically ethical trumps all of that. So everybody can be in a panic and quick, but okay, I got this. And now it almost seems like maybe we're yelling a little bit more. Hey, I got this. Can you do this? And, so somebody will say, all right, I'm on Twitter. All right, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, and we'll, and you go Google it. And then we'll come back here in, I don't know, 2 minutes and figure it out.
No, it's amazing how just fast everything is now. And you make a really good point about April 1st, because I always forget about the holiday, and every year I just log on Twitter and I'm like, whoa, this is really happening. And then of course it's like, nope, it's April 1st. But that's a really great point. I mean, it really is all hands on deck, I think, now because of social media and digital. And I think in a lot of ways it is a good thing, because we're seeing a lot more collaboration between different departments and different sections, because you kind of have to, because of kind of the way that the newsroom works and the way we're delivering news now. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about just how we deliver news. Obviously, the idea of being online is more than just social media. It has me thinking a lot about newsletters, push notifications, and other strategies that have been used online. Samantha, I know LA Taco launched an app, and I thought that was really exciting. Would love to kind of know from your perspective, kind of like, how's that been going? Kind of what was the goal of the app and how readers have really responded to that?
Right. Yes, we did launch our app, and we do have different guides and news pieces that exist on our app. And the audience has reacted in a way where it's accessible, and now it's a hub where they can go. We have different things on the app, not just our news that lives on there, but it's more of a central location that maybe they're not going to like type in our name in Safari, and it's now a place where they can find all their information much faster. And for us, I mean, how we deliver our news much quickly with social media is just targeting what people are going to react to the most, and making sure that when we're putting out our news and we make it in a timely way, that we transfer that to our app so that people can get the information they need, especially because we are a hyper-local publication. We want to make sure that the information exists in an accessible place for our audience.
And I like that idea of like having an accessible place to kind of, just one place
Great.
that has all the different news. And I think that's so important for, organizations as they are thinking about, where to find their audiences. And, I know for the LA Times in particular, Javier, would love to get your opinion on this. The LA Times has a ton of different news products, whether that's newsletters or, different apps and things like that. I would love to kind of know, what are some of your favorite news products at the Times and how you think those are reaching readers?
Gosh, it's interesting because oftentimes I'm working kind of story to story. Like there'll be something, either a project or a shorter kind of medium term story that's coming along. And as you're working on it, you have to, kind of segment your brain to think like, how is this going to work in a newsletter? How is this going to work in a push? How is this going to work in a tweet? How is this going to work on Facebook separate from the tweet? What like graphics can we pull out of it for Instagram? And so you kind of go through all the products, like taking them off one at a time. And now that I think about it, I don't know that I have a favorite. I mean, I think what's so fun about doing this job and thinking about stories this way is that there's some things that work really well in one way but don't really work well in another. Like the push just doesn't really work. It doesn't get open, whatever. And maybe that's some, bigger strategic problem you have to think through. But then, one part of the story that you pull out in a tweet just does bonkers. And so then you have to think like, oh, what was it about that worked? And can we repeat that? And so I don't know. I think that's kind of one of the other interesting things you get from social media is the feedback of like what really starts moving the needle in terms of getting people to read the thing, whatever the thing is.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said before, like there's so many learnings you could take from that, and you can really just apply it to, the next story, the next feature, things like that. So that's really great to see. Emily or Kim, are there any kind of, non-social platforms, whether that's newsletters or push alerts that you've all kind of incorporated or use at your organizations that have worked really well?
We do all of them. Yep, we are getting into newsletters, especially our stations. That's something they're working on more now. And I think I know I subscribe to a lot of newsletters from all different publications. I think they've evolved dramatically, especially in the last 6 months. I mean, I'm sure you guys all get them too. And I think that's great. I think for me, that feels like just another platform. Like Javier said, they're all different and you're really reaching. I think we used to think, oh, if you reach this person on TV, then they'll go and they'll use your website and they'll go to Facebook and they're going to see everything that you do. And then they're going to see all of your tweets. That is not the same person. And I think it's important to remember that. And whether it's social media, I mean, and that's important for reporters and anchors to know as well, is like, you might use one, depending on the content, like everything depends on the content. You might put a story on Facebook that you would never put on TikTok, or just because it wouldn't resonate, but you might put something on TikTok. And as everybody here knows, if you put it on Facebook, somebody might not understand what it means, what the point is, because you lose the context, right? Like with the challenges and the different videos that you might be putting out there, it's two totally different things. So I think understanding all of the platforms and their audiences is a constant challenge because they're, very different and there's always something new.
Yeah, we're always trying to remember what hat am I wearing? Who am I? What's my voice? Am I speaking for me? Am I speaking for my, my newscast? Am I speaking for the station? Yeah, it can get a little hairy trying to remember who you are when you're speaking, but it's critical that who your audience is. Emily is so right on.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of want to stay with you, Kim, for a second to kind of just talk about how, what it does it look like to be an anchor kind of in this digital age. I mean, I have so many friends who I know now who are kind of getting their start in broadcast, and a lot of them are just emphasizing how important it is for them to have their own Facebook page or to like make sure they're uploading all their reels to social media and getting that engagement. And that's something that a lot of people didn't have to think about before. So I'd like to know kind of like, what's your take on everything?
Yeah. Back in the olden days, I had, 3/4 inch tapes that I was mailing out. And so nowadays things are much easier. In fact, as a professor, there is a day, the final for this broadcast journalism class that I teach, where they put their resume reels and their websites up. And and it's now news directors and hiring managers have kind of known that right around May at any, virtually any school, they're going to get a dump on YouTube, and they just start clicking, looking for people's reels. And my students are getting calls just out of the blue. One day, one of my students got 4 calls in a day within about an hour and a half from all around the country, just because of what he had put on YouTube, and showed his, 3.5-minute reel or something. And that is powerful. And just like everything else, it's all about speed. My goodness. And that's exciting, but you got to also keep up too. If you keep adding things, other hiring managers have told me that you just make sure that you tell the students, don't just put in a website. You need to keep updating, and I'll maybe earmark if your YouTube page, and you just need to keep feeding it. But I guess like everything, we have to keep feeding the beast just with meat. I keep saying to my students, I'd rather you put meat in there than cotton candy. And I know that there are a lot of times that, if you just have a picture of yourself, okay, and I did it too. This last week, I updated my profile picture. So fine. Yeah, I did that also. There's this face, but most of it, please give some substance too, although I have noticed that on certain platforms, they don't want substance at all. They just want the looks.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think that's really the challenge of the digital age, is like, people know, what people want on some platforms, and sometimes it's not the meat, it's the cotton candy. So being able to balance that, I think, is really important. And looking at the chat, I see Kate has a question that I'm actually going to talk about next. So I'll just kind of go into that. We've talked kind of about all the good that social media can bring to news, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about the challenges that are also associated with it. For those of you who are very online, like myself, I'm sure you saw today, the New York Times executive editor, Dean Baquet, released a memo to the newsroom, kind of just talking about the staff's use of Twitter. He said a range of different things during the memo. He pretty much told the newsroom that, hey, your social media presence is optional for reporters. It was never, they weren't forced to have it, but he was kind of saying, like, if you want to not be online, that's great. He also talked about how the Times was devoting more resources to combat abuse. But he also talked about how journalists are always online. Here's a quote that he actually said today. I started to worry that Twitter had become too big a part of our journalistic lives. I was worried that some people were spending way too much time on Twitter. From the panel's perspectives, I would love to know, what should journalist relationships be like on Twitter? Should they be spending, is there too much time on Twitter being spent? Or kind of, what do you think about your kind of personal brand on Twitter? Does anyone want to kick it off?
I thought it was all a bit silly, because we all live on the internet. We do now. So I think it's fine to say spend less time on there. Sure. We could all probably be spending more time touching grass or whatever, but setting up a policy, I think, where you're asking people, where you're telling people, like, we're going to be monitoring you to some extent to make sure you're not saying something mean about your colleagues. Like, that's just, I don't know how you enforce that. I don't know what the point of that is. I don't know what that, like, the effect of that ends up being, because it seems like you're just creating a kind of a tough system where you're going to end up litigating a lot of strange things. But the general sentiment, like, be on Twitter less, sure. I go outside and talk to people. Talk to your sources. I don't know. I think that part, it's up to every person to kind of figure out their own limit. And they, do eventually, in a productive way, I hope.
Yeah, I ebb and flow. There are times that I completely cut off, many times on the weekend, especially if I'm, spending some time with my family, I completely cut off. And it hasn't been as hard as I thought it would. I'll then catch up, a day or two later, and that does take a while. I feel sometimes like I'm getting car sick trying to go through and catching up with everything. But our bosses have, they have not said anything like don't do that, but temper it. I was just talking to two doctors today, and they said one of the biggest concerns is that the reason why so many students are having mental health problems is because of the social media, and also kind of corresponding with all of the distance, that we are feeling so disconnected. And then, people post stuff that maybe it just looks all so perfect and they're not feeling perfect, that it's really messing with us, and we need to find a better balance. And I guess as journalists, that's really hard because we still need to find the story and stay up on it.
Yeah, I think you have to balance being aware of what's happening with, how do I say, avoiding some of the other things that happen on Twitter, the back and forth, the maybe not so productive troll engagement. I think that could, if I were a reporter, I would think getting too wrapped up in that, if it's not productive or not giving you more information, or you're not helping to inform, I don't think that would be very productive. It's why, I personally avoid getting too deep in any social media conversation, depending on the topic, just because most of the time it doesn't end well. But I think the energy that you spend there should be spent in a productive way that benefits you, and not, the other things that go on. But you have to be aware. So, everybody needs their space, though. Everybody needs a little balance, definitely, all the time, really.
Emily, you bring up a good point, because there have been so many instances of people getting shamed, or somebody who's doing the weather, and a viewer or somebody is trolling, saying, you look bad, whatever, put in any negative word there, and we all get that. All of us on the air, somebody will say something. I don't like you're this, you're that, or you're just vapid or whatever, and and you get so angry, right? And you want to protect yourself. And then you go, wait a minute, this is another time I need to take a beat, because if I engage in this, it's just like you said, Emily, it's not going to end well. And so there are so many times we just go, not even gonna bring it up. But it is crummy when you want to kind of defend somebody when the person is incorrect or mean.
Yeah, I think you probably have to have developed just an incredibly thick skin to be someone who reads. You have to read what is being written. Our content teams are in the same but very different boat. They have to read the comments on the stories that they've put out, right? And that can be very difficult, because sometimes they aren't related at all to what the story is about. But you have to read things that could be about you, or something that you're doing, or your story. And I think it's, for journalists, a good lesson just to take a beat and don't, just like you wouldn't on your own personal Facebook, or maybe you would, or maybe you don't even use Facebook, showing age here. But wherever you are, just take a minute and just realize that is the internet, and there's someone sitting on the other side who's not looking at you saying these things, and just kind of think about how to respond in a way that you're not pulling yourself down the pipe. I have seen productive discussions happen in those ways, and they do. But for talent too, it is really for reporters and anchors, the great thing about social is that, at least for TV stations, I can say, those are the faces of our TV stations, and they're what makes us all different. We might all tell the same stories at 5 or 6, not usually, but there may be very little difference in the content that we're airing, but it's who's delivering it. They're trusted, they're known in the community, and that is generally what brings you in to pick one newscast over another. So there's a lot of that. It is a great connection point for someone in the community to get to know the person who's on TV, or who's delivering the information. And it's a great place to be authentic, but it just, you have to be just realize that that's just a person behind a computer screen, when those things happen.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of going to Samantha really quickly, I'd be curious to know, how your team kind of deals with this. Because when I think of LA Taco, there's a lot of those really, fun stories of cool places to eat and hang out. But then there are serious stories of investigating, like how the cities are like, not cleaning up or keeping homeless encampments sanitized. And there's these stories that, may have very polarized kind of comments from, both sides of the coin. And I'm curious of how kind of your reporters kind of deal with that, because I follow a lot of LA Taco reporters on Twitter and I see a lot of angry people tweeting them, and I'd just be curious of how they kind of handle that.
Right. Yes. So you do bring up one of our investigative reporters, Lexis Olivier Ray. He does a lot of those investigative pieces, the one you mentioned about homelessness encampments, making sure their sanitation stations are kept up to par. And those are very polarizing stories where people who are in those communities where these encampments are like, let's get these people out or let's move them. And then there's other people who are like, yes, let's support them and make sure their stations are clean. So navigating and speaking to our journalists, it's always be above what you need to remember that you wrote this and that there's a purpose behind it. And you need to remember that when there's people, maybe attacking your piece or being negative in the comments, because people will always have an opinion. And especially for our newsroom, people know that our social media is very active. We like to respond back to people and, say like, hey, like you've tried this spot, great. Like, here's a recommendation for your next like trip or whatever. So for the pieces that we do put out that are very polarizing and there's all these opinions that are just super flared out, we always make sure to let our journalists know that, hey, you need to remember that you can take a step back. You don't need to respond right away. Social media is very quick, and the response time that people expect is like, why is it taking so long? And you'll always get people who are kind of like egging our journalists on like, hey, it's been a day or things like that. But we always make sure to let our team know, like, you can take your time with your response because you took this much time to showcase this to the people and educate them and inform them. You can take your time and respond, or you don't have to, because there is an incredible amount of resources that people can reach out to, and one comment shouldn't dictate the quickest response ever. So especially when it comes to those sorts of sensitive investigative pieces that we put out, we always like to tell everyone, hey, take a step back. Social media is not the end all be all for you.
I think that's such great advice. Just like take a step back. I think it's so easy to be caught up in the moment. I've gone online and I've seen prominent journalists with 1 million followers arguing with someone who doesn't even have a profile photo and they may have 5 followers. So it just kind of shows you how important it is to really kind of take that beat. And I think that's really great advice. Wanted to kind of go to Kim next. I mean, you're an anchor and you're also an educator. And I feel like, throughout your career, you've kind of really offered so much great advice on kind of, the do's and don'ts of, how to really just incorporate and be online. So would love to kind of hear any thoughts you have about that or any advice you could share to the group.
Happy to. Do you want me to pull up my pictures now, or would you rather me not?
Yeah, that's great.
Later? Okay. All right. So I will share my screen because there are a few things that we have shared with our students before. And you see, I've just tweeted us, by the way. So where's my page? Okay, let me pull it up here. So we had just noticed that gosh, let me get rid of all of this so you can just see it. We figured that there were some best practices when it came to Facebook versus Twitter and such, and we just want to make sure, and this is kind of where my rubric goes along with my students too, is that you need to have clear writing and make sure that what you write makes sense to the picture or the video that you're showing. And please do not share your opinion. It's certainly not on your, professional page, but really even on your private page. If people know you're a journalist, we need to keep that part private. And for some, that can be very difficult, especially what our world went through over the last 2 years. Sometimes it's very hard to, not share your opinion, but instead, we can use our connection to maybe share more facts and and people's, insight and situations wherever they are. Consider how your post will age. So if we're all ensconced in what's going on right now, maybe even in a week, we will have forgotten. So just make sure that things are very clear. Also, of course, your boss is watching. So please make sure that if you think your boss would be okay with it, yes. But if you think not, then if you think you're going to get called into the corner office, then you may want to rethink exactly what you're posting. Obviously, what we were just talking about before, you got to verify everything. Really, you got to have your sources and not just some rando weird source that you love to follow, but I mean, really make sure that you've got some legitimate sources or a couple of them to make sure that the information you have is correct. Attribute your source and be compassionate. We don't want to be those people we were just talking about who might say something and somebody had posted something like, oh yeah, I can't go, I don't know, something mean about Kansas. And it was like, why would you do that? First off, you're in Fresno and poor Fresno does not get, talked about very well. And here you are saying mean things about Kansas where you've never been. And so what do you, be sensitive, be compassionate, be nice, don't be a jerk. So the other thing that we found, especially with Facebook, is if you can share something with emotion, that really does help with that connection in your community. And always use video. And when it comes to Twitter, have a professional handle. And I don't know, you might say, well, Peace Kim, that doesn't sound like it's very professional. My work one is Kim KMPH, the station I work at. But there are so many Kim Stevens out there. I could not find one that had my name. And this was a gazillion years ago. So anyway, that's what I picked. But we've also learned that if you can thread, if you're really out on a story or out at a situation, you can keep adding to a thread or creating a thread, and that can really, get some followers, but also really add some breadth to whatever it is that you are posting. Pictures, video, links, always. The thing is that I'm noticing with my students is that they'll just throw something up, but they neglected to connect with the people they were talking about. So like, for instance, we have this thing in town, an organization that's really been growing. It's called Beautify Fresno. And people go out virtually every weekend and they go clean up these neighborhoods. And it's really become something special and needed. And so I had a student the other day go out and do a story on Beautify Fresno, but never linked Beautify Fresno. So Beautify Fresno had no idea that they had done this. And I thought, well, that's really silly. If you're talking about an organization, an agency, or I don't know, even doing something about mental health, or in my case recently, head and neck cancer. A family member of mine is a 15-year survivor, and I posted something about that the other day. Connect with these people so that they know, you just gotta remember, this is how we network. This is how we connect. And when it comes to Instagram, the visuals are really what, builds that. Inspirational things. This is what I was saying with when Emily and I were talking about what works and what doesn't, is that I noticed, with Instagram, I know that we follow this, for news, but for the most part, I get more comments and connections with people who just want to see me and my family and a picture of, I don't know, me without makeup or something like that. It seems to be, I don't know, more interesting to the people who are following. And I guess that adds to the authenticity. So that's something interesting. And the hashtags can work here, but other places, hashtags are not that big. So just, be mindful of that. We said that journalists are not influencers. However, we can be a news influencer for certain things that are journalistically ethical. So if we wanted to be spending a little more time on mental health awareness or race awareness, things like that, that is where you can be a positive influencer without being check out my outfit and you can buy this too, because that's really not appropriate as a journalist. And finally, I'll just end with this, a couple of examples. we want to remember the theme and the context of everything we post on whatever medium. This I saw a number of years ago. This reporter was live at a cemetery, and they were talking about a controversial burial, well, from Huntsville First Lady Eula Battle. And so this was a heavy day in that community, and it was clearly raining, and she was smiling and looking cute, and she said she'd been flipped off. I don't know why she was flipped off, but this is a heavy story, and the picture doesn't quite match that. And so I think it's really important that we make sure that we are sensitive to the situation and our surroundings and the topic. This one is a story about a reporter. This is a reporter who was down in Australia covering the terrible wildfires years ago. And this was the post. That just doesn't fit with the theme and the context of the story. And so that is can be considered rather troublesome. This looks like a great group of people. Looks like they're having a fantastic time. But this was during the pandemic when we were A, not supposed to be together, and B, if we were together, we needed to have masks on. And this was also before there were vaccines and boosters. So that was, those people got in a lot of trouble for that post. And that maybe, I mean, we saw there were quite a few people who got in trouble for posting things, being maskless and maybe insensitive to their surroundings in light of that pandemic situation. Here we are as reporters or anchors telling people these are the things that you're supposed to do and then not doing them ourselves. And that's hypocritical, and you can lose people really quickly that way.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for sharing. You brought up something really interesting in the beginning that I would love to get opinions from the rest of the group. This idea of kind of, not sharing opinions online. That's kind of been a huge topic of conversation for the past 2 years. I've seen arguments from kind of every single, side and middle and every part of it. And I'd love to know kind of, from all of your perspectives, where do you all sit on kind of sharing opinions on social? Has that changed in the past few years, and how you're grappling with that?
I can go. I think it's our job as journalists to provide context. The context does not mean it should be this way or I believe this. Sometimes you will tell a personal story where it helps people to understand what it is you're talking about, but I think context is what our responsibility is. And that's really where we need to stay.
I feel like, don't say something that's like totally nuts. Like, this politician's like, POS, like whatever. I mean, he's like, some people want to do that. It's like, don't do that. But I do think it's fine to say, something that like is a fact. Like, I mean, I ride my bike around LA and there are not enough bike lanes in LA. I think that I would tweet that. And some people at work might say like, well, I don't know, like that's an issue that could pop up in a city council race. And it's like, I would say to them, I'm not weighing into the city council race. I'm not saying this candidate, this, that, or the other. So it's like, that is kind of where you get into the gray area of like, some people think like it would not be okay to say there need to be more bus lanes in LA. And I would say whatever, like, there are bigger problems in the world. I'm going to say that. And then I think you just kind of have to like, litigate that out with people kind of individually. But I would say, like anything, even with this New York Times policy, I mean, like you can do these policies, but there are no real hard and fast rules. So then you just have to be prepared to deal with whatever the consequences are. Like maybe some people won't talk to you because of the things you tweet and you're closing yourself off potentially to sources. Maybe in your view, you don't want to talk to them anyway. So, I mean, then you just have to think like, well, what does it mean about you and your reporting? I mean, does it factor into it? So I don't know. I try to tell, I mean, not a lot of people ask me, but if people were to ask me, I would tell them, think about, is it worth it potentially? And, can you rephrase it in a way where it's not as super heated? to where you're just kind of sharing an observation, kind of like, as you do in a story where you're saying, this is the case, this is what it's like out there.
No, that's such a great point. And I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I don't work in like a newsroom in particular anymore, but I always am someone who's always tweeting about bike lanes and public transportation because it's something I'm like passionate about. And, I've worked in newsrooms before where it's been the same thing of like, don't tweet about that because the people at City Hall are giving me like a hard time. I've heard that from other reporters. So there's definitely kind of, lots of things to juggle with. Samantha, do you have any kind of thoughts or comments around this?
I have to agree with everyone. I think it's just being delicate and learning how to navigate as well, and being sensitive to what's going on. Like I mentioned previously, just kind of like taking a step back and really like taking advantage that you are at an upper hand here where you can provide context, and that's truth. What you're putting out is hopefully backed up by facts and all that. But truly remaining in a space where you are providing people with information and context in place of projecting out your opinion and such.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And now I kind of want to get to some of the questions that we have in the chat. The first one I kind of wanted to talk about was really just this kind of idea of staying safe online and really, harassment online. I mean, when we're looking at harassment, it's been happening since the start of social networks and the internet. Obviously, it existed before that in different ways, people sending in letters and giving us comments. And something that we've seen, especially in social media, is that people who are getting harassed are often women or people of color. And Tim actually had a question that I can throw out to the whole group. Have you all developed ways to protect yourself and your staff from harassment that seems to be growing on social media? And how do you support staff that are encountering harassment?
I can say that, yes, this happens. I mean, it definitely happens when things reach a level of being more than just what we were talking about a few minutes ago, where there's an argument, when things are, very clearly on a different level of someone's being targeted or anything like that. Our advice is tell us immediately and we will help you. Instead of trying to handle things yourself, please, we want to know, when that kind of thing is going on, because our first priority is for our journalists to be safe. So it's all about communication.
Yeah, I agree with that. And for our newsroom, what we have these forums where, when the pandemic started and everyone was just truly all online, we had sort of a forum with our newsroom and said, hey, this is what's happening. There's going to be a lot of people online. And reiterating to our newsroom that they have an outlet themselves to come to our team and that we are a resource to them, not just for them to let us know like, hey, this is what's happening, but more so to kind of unpack, and that they can rely on us as a support. One, to, if things get escalated, to take action, but another, to, if they just want to talk about it, that they have us as a resource as well.
We had a reporter who ended up getting stalked by someone who would see where she was posting from and then go down and find her. She did share a lot of personal stuff, on her social, and she didn't think anything of it. And that she's kind of changed her tune now because that was really scary. So she immediately went to the bosses, and then they immediately went to the police. But that is something to really think about and be careful that, do you want to always have your location on everywhere you tweet or, where you post? And do you have to tell everybody where you are at exactly what time when you are doing your reports, for your own safety, of course.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, something I've seen from a few other newsrooms, including like BuzzFeed News, for example, I know they said that when, reporters were, getting harassed online, if they wrote a big story and they were getting a lot of, really just bad comments online, they've had other staffers kind of just take control of their account and do as much like blocking and muting as possible so that they didn't have to kind of, deal with that. I'm seeing more and more newsrooms kind of really invest in more security teams, whether that's, helping with the doxing and helping with, security, or even just prepping journalists on how to secure their accounts. I mean, that's something we're seeing so much happen right now. People like losing their accounts getting hacked, and just making sure that you have a really healthy, digital footprint, and making sure you have two-factor authentication and all those things on is really, really important for journalists. And I think that's really kind of the first step of keeping people even safer online. So that's a really great point. Some more questions that we have in the chat. We have a question for Samantha. So we've seen LA Taco start a live podcast. Was the podcast a response to the oversaturation of social media?
That's a great question. So, in short, no, it was not. Our live podcast, a lot of our journalists listen to podcasts and they like getting some of their information. If they're driving around to the next location, whatever it may be, they listen to podcasts. So for us, we cover a lot of different topics, because we are local to LA. And we thought, hey, we're going to start a podcast with the common denominator being food, because food opens conversations. And we've had guests like Senator Alex Padilla be on the show. And from that, we've had the live podcast video, but we also can create short reels and clips that exist on social media where people can connect to different avenues and different parts of the story that you may not listen through the whole part of the podcast, but maybe if you see a clip of it on TikTok or Instagram reels, that's the piece that was most important to you. So the live podcast was not in response to oversaturation of social media, but more so to give people a different platform and long form place to listen to news and food and culture.
I thought it was a brilliant idea. I feel like I saw those clips like online everywhere. So, it was so cool to just see something like really kind of have a second life on social. So that was a really great.
It also humanizes a lot of the stories that we put out. We had a new segment that we go through. And the guests we bring on, sometimes we have featured them on the site itself. So it gives a story second wind, like you said, but it also allows people to get a more intimate look at who's on the show and maybe talk about something that they're working on that really gives our audience a different depth of perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question from Jaylene. I'll kind of open this up to all of you. As a reporter, have you ever turned down reporting on a topic out of fear of the responses from the public or because it contradicted your own opinions?
No. I think that if anything, it makes us better at our job by knowing all sides. I think it makes us better as human beings to hear all sides, even if there are things that we don't maybe believe in. But again, reporting on something that I don't believe in is just as easy as reporting on something that I do believe in, because I am so just making sure that I have all bases covered and all sides factually and ethically covered. I've never said no to anything like that. There have been times that we've been places where we were afraid we were going to be unsafe. And then it turned out that we were, after maybe our first report. We called the newsroom and they said, yep, pack it up, let's get out because safety is more important. Is there a place though, the news director would ask, can you go someplace maybe higher and still cover it and get a shot from a different angle and be away from all of the crowds and still cover the story? And I thought, oh, wow, I wish I had thought of that instead of saying, we got to get out of here, because that's what we ended up doing. And then it all worked out. So safety, of course, but always go. And maybe we enrich our lives and our viewers as well.
I have not been an active reporter for a few years, but when I was reporting, I would say that I never turned down assignments because it contradicted my own opinions, largely because usually assignments take the form of like, here's an idea, however, like, harebrained or half-baked, or, more complete. And you can always respond ideally, depending, I guess, on your relationship with the editor, with a better idea or a different angle. You can oftentimes say, well, like, okay, that can be where we start. I'm going to go do some reporting and we'll see where I end up and like what I hear from people. But I can at least, I think I remember there being cases where I was like, I just don't think I have enough, talent, skill. Just kind of like, I don't feel comfortable like pursuing that subject because it's so complex or fraught that like, I think I could be doing something better with my time, which I think is a slightly different thing. But that's what I got.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Another question we have from the audience is from Kevin. Kevin said he was aghast when a TV managing editor told him that social media has replaced the need for scanners on the assignment desk. So the question is, have we become overly reliant on social media as a news gathering tool?
It's just a different news gathering tool. I wouldn't say the information you get from a scanner is the same information that you get from social media. I think if anything, social media, it opens up, this happens a lot with, breaking news, right? Something happens and people are there and everyone has pictures of it. The first question that comes in my mind is, does that picture belong to the person who posted it? Because we don't know that, right? Like, just because someone posts something does not mean they own it or they took it. And that's the very first question. So it's like this question of authenticity. And then there's, not to mention, is it even real? But finding out where it came from, if it's real, if it's authentic, if it's today, if it happened where the person says that it happened. I feel like that's content, like that's more information, but it actually makes the job of the assignment desk more complicated, and really any journalist, because you have more to go through. So you get more to deal with and you get more to choose from when it comes to getting the information, but you have to kind of decipher what it is. So I don't think a replacement would be the way I would describe it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just kind of like another tool that you kind of have in the toolkit. We have a question from Stephanie that I would love to hear kind of perspective from kind of both Javier and Kim. Stephanie is a social media producer for an LA news station, and Stephanie's just kind of asking for advice on how to get talent and anchors and reporters to help with content for social media platforms. Stephanie said that sometimes people feel like it's kind of, she's being a pest, and to have to help with all of that. So kind of just, any help that you have from that. Would love to hear kind of, Javier's side. I know you're kind of on the audience engagement side and was a former reporter, and then Kim kind of as someone who is talent, kind of how you deal with that.
This is a very complex one I spent a lot of time thinking about. Because when I was a reporter, I'd be like out on the scene of, I remember there was one time I was covering an oil spill in Santa Barbara, and like I tweeted a photo of an oiled seal, and then I got a call from one of our social people and was like, can you do a Facebook Live right now about the seal and like talk about what's going on? And I was like, I need to catch the scientist who's like, here doing an animal account that's going to be an important piece of information. So like, no, I can't. But I didn't, and like at the time I was like a little like, like, who is this? What are they doing? But in retrospect, that is kind of, so I guess to answer your question, Stephanie, it's you're not a pest. Like you're doing a very important job of trying to get more people to read the reporting your organization is doing. And so it's a very necessary thing. And then I guess the question of how do you make it an easier thing? I would recommend trying to like kind of do like a kind of like a multi-pronged approach where it's important to have support from your bosses and the bosses at whatever organization you're at to try to like create a culture where people see that the stuff you're doing is not like, something where people might think of it or you're being a pest. It's like a very important part of the overall process. And one thing we've done that I think is pretty successful is we try to do digital trainings where we don't just talk about like how do you, embed something and do stuff in the CMS, but also talk about like, these are examples where stuff we do on social really works and gets a lot of eyeballs into a story and gets people to read the story. And kind of what, and really show people numbers of like, this is how this stuff is useful and helpful. And, even like, a lot of the, older hard-bitten reporters who you'd think, maybe are not that into this process, they get it. They're all kind of at the end of the day trying to get more people to read their work. So I think that's one way of approaching it. And then I think just also try not to take it personally if someone's, doing 15 things that day and you're, 3 out of 15 or 13 out of 15, they might just need a minute to get back to you, and you can always post it later, I guess. It's something I try to tell myself. Something's, not coming immediately when I want it. That person might have a bunch of other stuff going on, and whenever they get it to me, it'll be good enough.
Yeah, I think that it's that multitasking business. And it's, we go in with a reporter mindset and we know we've got to get this, and this, and we've got to get that interview right. But then we can understand that whole value of a Facebook Live at a oil-soaked animal. We have some, I work with people who are like that too. But then other days they're into it, so we all have good days and bad days. We all have days where we can multitask like crazy and other days where we cannot. And, but I agree with you, Javier, that as long as it's kind of a newsroom centric discussion and that everybody's training, and we know that really this is what everybody needs to do. And again, also don't take it personally because, I don't think they're just mad at you. It's just, I'm frustrated. I'm trying to get this. And now you want me to do this. And I know I got to do this, but I got to get that, and so just, there will be days like that.
I would add one other thing too. I just gave this advice to someone else the other day with basically the same question. Sometimes when people don't quote want to do something, it's not that they don't want to, it's that they have no idea what they're supposed to do. If you're a reporter for a different platform and someone from digital comes to you and asks you for something, but they say, hey, can you help me with your story? But you don't say exactly what you need. They don't know what you need, and they might not be willing to tell you that because they might be worried that you would think that they don't know what they're doing. So I would say ask for exactly what you want. And all of the support stuff. The other thing is to work with people who do want to, and that can be an example for others in your newsroom of what works. So like go work with Kim because she clearly knows how to do it, and use an example to show the rest of the newsroom what is good.
That's a really great point. And we're kind of reaching the 7 o'clock hour, but I did kind of want to end on one last question from Alex, who asks for all of your favorite Los Angeles / Southern California accounts to follow online. Samantha, do you want to kick us off?
Of course, I'm going to say follow LA Taco and follow any of our journalists and contributors. They always have fun places that they're at, things that they're reporting on. So any of our group, our platform are definitely go-tos.
Javier?
Yeah, I really like two reporters, Kate Cagle and Lexis Olivier Ray, just because they're like, when they're doing their stories, you really feel like you're with them like the whole process, where they're like, I got a tip, I got this, I'm figuring out, I'm expanding on it. And I feel like when the end product comes out, you're like, okay, I want to see like how this all fit together. And then like, the Americana at Brand meme account is just constant laughs for me. I mean, the other ones that I think are really good, or I'm trying to think of, I personally have a bias towards like all the film and Twitter accounts that tweet out like kind of weird out of context clips, but those aren't necessarily totally LA, but I don't know.
Kim?
Well, I'm a little north of LA, but I will say that I'll just do a shout out to a good friend of mine who I follow, Brandy Hitt at ABC7. She's now an anchor at for the morning show, but and I used to work with her. but so she shows a lot of behind the scenes stuff as well as real news also. So she has a balance. And then if you follow her on a different, I think it's Facebook, maybe it's Instagram. She's a DIYer also. And she's building stuff in the backyard. She's got no makeup on, and she's just her. And I like the realism, the reality of her.
Awesome. And Emily, do you have anyone?
No, I'm gonna mention someone who works at Foxdale. I really do mean this. I'm no longer in SoCal, but Alex Michelson, our main anchor, he's really good on Twitter about everything. He's very looped in all the time. So a lot of times I find myself learning things from his Twitter account. So everyone go give him a follow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of these really great follows. Definitely some people I need to add to my list. But for those who tuned in, thank you so much for listening in on this panel. To our panelists, thank you so much for your thoughts. It was just so great to hear all of your opinions and just kind of, how you approach social media. And you all just provided such valuable information today. Alexi, should I turn this back to you?
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And of course, thank you to our panelists. Our moderator was amazing. I definitely learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did. SPJ does events like this throughout the year, so you can definitely find more online on our social media as well. But it was great, so thank you everyone. Nathan?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nathan Solis. I'm the Vice President of the Los Angeles chapter. And we just really thank everyone for joining us tonight. We are going to be having another panel discussion at the end of this month that has to do with advocating for yourself in the newsroom to promote, to ask for a raise. And we are also going to have a regional conference, which is in person, which is kind of exciting. We're putting that together. So we'll have more information for that. And then throughout the year, well, in the springtime, which is now, we are accepting applications for scholarships. SPJ LA puts together where we give out 6 scholarships to journalism students in college and in high school. So feel free to head over to spjla.org and you can follow us and join us and become a member of our chapter. All right. Thanks again, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.